day 750 of the Trump administration, and today one of its highest-ranking officials was the very first to feel the full force of a highly empowered and at times angry Democratic-led House of Representatives. Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, spent nearly 6 hours answering questions from the members of the Judiciary Committee. Much of today's hearing was contentious. Here's just one sample of the mood in that hearing room.
This hearing is important because there are many Americans throughout the country who are confused. I'm confused. I really am. We're all trying to figure out, who are you? Where did you come from? And how the heck did you become the head of the Department of Justice?
For a large part of the day, things continued about like that. Democrats tried to keep the focus squarely on Whitaker's handling of the Mueller investigation, which, remember, he had prejudged and criticized before getting this job.
Have you been briefed on criminal or counterintelligence matters within the special counsel's purview?
Chairman, thank you for that question. As you know, I cannot talk about ongoing investigations.
But you can say whether you've been briefed or not.
And I have been briefed on it.
Have you communicated anything you learned in that briefing about the investigation to President Trump? Yes or no?
I have not talked to the President of the United States about the special counsel's investigation. We have followed the special counsel's regulations to a T. There has been no event, no decision that has required me to take any action, and I have not interfered in any way with the special counsel's investigation. The President did not ask for, and I did not provide any commitments, promises concerning the special counsel's investigation or any other investigation.
Have there been any discussions at the department about pardons for Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, or Michael Cohen?
As I've been an acting attorney general, I have not been involved in any discussions of any pardons, even and including the ones you're discussing.
So we tried to put together for you right there what the committee was able to get out of Matthew Whitaker about the Mueller inquiry. Neil Katyal, who is the former acting Solicitor General of the United States under President Obama, had this reaction to today's hearing.
The preposterousness of this man being the Attorney General of the United States. I mean, you saw someone who is so unqualified, he shouldn't be the Attorney General of 30 Rock, 3 Rock. A 7th grader would have done a better job, a more respectful job than what he did. It was arrogant, it was irresponsible, and it really calls into the question the president's judgment for putting this man at the head of the hallowed Department of Justice.
In other exchanges during today's hearing, the acting AG was pressed on how he views the special counsel and whether he agrees with the president's characterization of this investigation.
Do you agree with the president's statement that the Russia investigation is a witch hunt?
As I mentioned previously, Congressman, I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment about an ongoing investigation. I have been on the record about my respect for Bob Mueller and his ability to conduct this investigation.
Do you believe he's honest, yes or no?
I have no reason to believe he's not honest, so yes, I do believe he's honest.
Can you say right now, Mr. President, Bob Mueller is honest and not conflicted?
Congressman, I'm not a puppet to repeat what you're saying.
Can you say it to the president, though?
Congressman, I am not here to be a puppet to repeat terms and words that you say that I should say.
And for the record, it is worth noting that the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, the FBI Director Christopher Wray, and the Attorney General nominee William Barr have all maintained they do not believe this investigation to be a witch hunt, as the president is fond of calling it. The friction over the issue of time was also evident today as one by one Whitaker took on his questioners.
Have you ever been asked to approve any request or action to be taken by the special counsel?
Mr. Chairman, I see that your 5 minutes is up, and so I'm here voluntarily. We have agreed to 5-minute rounds.
Did you have a confirmation hearing, and has it been more than 10 years since you testified before Congress?
Congresswoman,
can the clock be restored?
It was. I'm sorry, what was your, I don't know if your time's been restored or not.
Mr. Attorney General, we're not joking here, and your humor is not acceptable.
At the request of a number of people, the committee will stand in recess for 5 minutes.
I get 5 minutes for lunch.
Whitaker likely has just days left on the job. The Senate just has to vote, and William Barr can be sworn in as the next and permanent Attorney General. Of course, Democrats also have their concerns about his views on the Mueller inquiry, stemming from that memo that he wrote and nobody apparently asked for, in which he questioned pursuing obstruction. However, Barr's recent confirmation hearing was a lot less contentious.
Have you discussed the Mueller investigation with the president or anyone else in the White House?
I discussed the Mueller investigation, but not in any particular substance. I can go through my conversations with you if you want.
There is also news tonight concerning ex-Trump advisor Roger Stone, his friend of 40 years, who Mueller has accused of lying to Congress, obstruction, and witness tampering, 7 counts in all. Today, Mueller's team filed documents supporting a potential gag order on Stone, citing his recent television interviews and how his media appearances might undermine a fair trial. Stone's team made its own filing, arguing against such an order, noting that they say he has a relative lack of notoriety, claiming that his social media footprint isn't as big as, say, Kim Kardashian's. Stone's lawyers are also asking for a new judge to be appointed in the case. They object to having the same judge who's presiding over the Manafort case and previous Mueller indictments as well. And for good measure, Roger Stone gave his own home security video of his own arrest to federal authorities to the conservative Sinclair Broadcasting. With that, let's bring in our leadoff panel on a Friday night. Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Cynthia Auxney, former federal prosecutor, veteran of the DOJ. And Frank Figliuzzi, former FBI assistant director for counterintelligence. Welcome to you all. Frank, there I was listening to you on this network at 4 p.m. today, as all hardworking Americans should. And I heard the following quote from you. Listen, I'm not kidding when I say I have interviewed terrorists who were more cooperative and respected than Matt Whitaker was today. Frank, make your case.
Yeah, that's the truth. What we saw today is an utter disdain for process, for accountability, for government oversight. What we saw today was not America's lawyer, which is what the Attorney General of the United States is supposed to be. What we saw today was a partisan representative for this president, an advocate for a party, an advocate for a president. And there's good news and there's bad news, Brian. The good news is Matt Whitaker has about a week left in office. He hasn't pressed any buttons. My theory is that the special counsel has tolerated him, briefed him just enough to keep him satisfied, but not given him everything. And that's the good news. The bad news is we have a glimpse in Whitaker of what President Trump could do if he had his own way, selecting his own people in each and every cabinet position without any need for review or confirmation process. And that's a scary thought. Whitaker needs to move on, needs to learn some respect for the process. He's that guy, you know, in high school, you're at the high school reunion, you hear that some guy just became the acting Attorney General of the United States, and you say, excuse me, he became what? We saw a guy over his head, a political, partisan attorney, and not an acting Attorney General today.
Cynthia, I'm tempted to ask you to compare and contrast Whitaker and Mr. Barr, but as I do, I should say that Neil Katyal on this network today made a very interesting observation that the difference between the two men is so kaleidoscopic that he fears that Democratic watchdogs will ease up on their view of Barr, won't hold him accountable just because he is so not Whitaker. And he said it more elegantly than I just did.
Well, that's true. I mean, on some level, we have to be happy that we're done with this man. I mean, he had no respect for the process. He was an embarrassment to the Department of Justice, and he showed what the administration thinks about oversight. And you know what was even worse on some level? When we got off the Mueller investigation, he also showed he had no empathy. You know, one of the Congress women was asking him about these kids in the border who are separated, and he looked at her like she was wasting his time because those kids mean nothing to him. And I thought, how can we have? You just want to collapse. How can the Attorney General of the United States care nothing about children? And that's what we had today. If you love the Department of Justice, it was a sad day.
And to reduce it to brass tacks, Cynthia, were you satisfied with his answers on Mueller? Do you have any concerns about his effect on, say, the Southern District of New York investigations in his remaining days?
Well, I was convinced that he's not capable of affecting the investigation. I mean, this guy could not organize himself out of a bathtub. So in some level, I actually felt better about that, because there's no way he could have done anything, in my opinion, to hurt the Mueller investigation. He isn't capable, nor could he roll the Southern District of New York. But it was interesting that he dodged the Southern District of New York questions. The other thing that's sort of weird, as he's trying to say, I had no conversations with the president, he's also sending letters about there might be executive privilege, and those things don't jive together, because if you haven't had a conversation, there's no reason for anybody to say there needs to be executive privilege. So everything doesn't match up with this guy. I sort of think it's time for him to leave town, and no one's going to miss him.
Jonathan Lemire, it was apparent to a lot of people watching this could be a performance for, as we like to call the president, the audience of one. Any reporting on how this might have gone over?
Yeah, no, Brian, you're exactly right. That's certainly a truism of Trump world, the idea that so many members of his own staff, his own cabinet, try to communicate with him through television, or in a case like this, through a televised hearing. From my reporting within the building, the president himself was watching this morning, although he did have to leave about halfway through. He went for his annual physical today. Brian, you'll be happy to know he's in good health, according to the doctor.
Oh, we have a whole segment on it later.
Spoiler alert. But White House aides I talked to sort of had mixed reviews. They did appreciate the fact that he's sort of combative tone, that he was aggressive in defending the administration, that he wasn't, cowed by these Democratic lawmakers, some of whom were, clearly grandstanding. That's par for the course in a situation like this. But there was a sense that Whitaker came off as ill-prepared and not quite, frankly, qualified for that position. And then that in the building, they recognize reflected poorly on this West Wing, and they'll be grateful when the new permanent Attorney General, takes his post, potentially within the week.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.